I'll call the City of Solana Design Review Board meeting to order. John, could you do roll call, please?
We are aware that two members, actually three members are away today. Carrie Arbster is our chair, Tom Heater, our vice chair, and Gary Martins. So we have the remaining four here today.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. And have you all had a chance to review both sets of minutes? Yes. And does anyone have any corrections?
No, I don't.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve those?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I can second it.
Okay, I have an approval and a second. All in favor of approving both sets of minutes, say aye. Aye. Motion carried. Okay, John, moving into new business, could you brief us on item 3.1?
Thank you, board members. This application is from Jones Gillum Renz Architects on behalf of Clark Mize and Linville Chartered, and the request is to allow the alteration of the west facade of the building with windows and the alteration of the existing sidewalk and right-of-way in front of the building along South 8th Street. The original building at 129 South 8th was constructed in the 1930s. It was the Austin's Food Market up during the 1960s and became the law office for Clark Mize Linville Chartered in 1970 when they redid the outside of the building with a composite masonry exterior consisting of stucco with a gravel aggregate surface. In 1984, they did put a 40-foot addition onto the building, and there was a front entrance to the law office that is centered on the building itself, and this shows the existing building is at the lower one here. It does have a 25-foot storefront that was last City Plumbing back early in the 1990s, and they are placing two additional narrow windows on the proposed elevation, which is the upper one here. They will match the narrow windows that are on the south facade of the building as well as the two existing ones here. And this is under phase one. Also under phase one is a replacement of the wood entrance door in the alcove along 8th Street and a replacement with a aluminum glass entrance door. And this is intended to soften the entrance into the building and to allow natural light into the receptionist so that she can better monitor the surroundings here. This shows the building itself with 8th Street on the outside here. And under phase two, which will take place at a different time, there will be a removal of the slanted angled head-in parking spaces along South 8th Street in front of the building. And we'll show you that in a photograph. And the replacement with a filled-out curb and right-of-way planter that goes out and captures the street and turns this from angled parking into parallel parking. And to do that, they're bringing the sidewalk area out as well as the planting area so it is roughly where the street is at this point. This is intended to soften the appearance of the building, which is often masked by parking cars in front of that, as well as laying a more comfortable feeling on entering and exit the building because you're not right next to the existing cars. There will be some landscaping as part of this in the planter areas, though that hasn't been finalized at this point. What you are looking at today is the proposal, which is to look at phase one, and that would be the windows and the door, as well as the schematic design for the new parking arrangement there. What is notable about the new parking arrangement is it will tie in pretty well with our downtown streetscape system, and it will have saw-cut decorative concrete sidewalks here, as well as brick panels that are interspersed along the sidewalk area here. There is some landscaping, a small tree is in this location, and there is a large mature tree at the very north location, and they have not decided yet whether that's going to stay or leave, but it is in good condition, and it does mask the street up and down 8th Street, so the applicant would probably address that better. But in looking at this, we would suggest the following findings: that the new windows would match the original in design, size, and spacing, that the original ratio of window and storefront opening is to solid wall won't be changing, and the street level entrance is designed to enhance the appearance of the building and make it more transparent and pedestrian friendly. So your alternatives today would be to approve the application upon finding the proposed improvements conform to the relevant standards of the Business Improvement District. You could approve that subject to conditions. If you need additional information, the applicant can provide that for you at a later date. And you could table the application to obtain that information. In the case of now, there is an appeal process. Staff's recommendation would be option number 2, that if there are any significant changes to the design materials approved by the Design Review Board, that these would be presented to staff to determine whether additional review is required. And number 2, the proposed planning plan for the street planners will be submitted for review by city staff before those plannings are installed. So at this point, staff would welcome any questions you might have, and the applicant, Mr. Regier, is also here today.
Okay, does the board have any questions for John or the applicant?
John, seeing as this application is filed by JGR Architects, I am recusing myself from conversation and vote. Do you need for me to leave the room during discussion?
I don't think what you have rises to the level of conflict of interest, that just a simple recusal from participation in the matter would be sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. If there are no other questions for staff, the applicant is also in hand today.
The new parking with the landscaping on 8th Street, that'll be parallel parking, and it'll be,
What you're looking at there is the new curb line,
that's what I was,
and
okay.
this is moved out. Right now, the angle of spaces come all the way in against the sidewalk. So there's very little of the sidewalk there to travel on. And the new spaces will be parallel parking at the new curb line out here.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to clear up. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you, John.
And it looks like the new door is still inset like it is. They're just replacing the wood door with the glass door? Okay.
Would you like to add anything, Mr. Regier?
You did a nice job, unless there's any other questions, really.
Nope.
And the planters are just low planters. They're not big old tall planters. They're just gonna be low planters, pretty much like this landscape.
Sir, could you step up to the mic sheet?
The planters that they have, like John was explaining, pretty much match what we're doing on the streetscape project. The planters are low, they're not real tall planters or anything. And as John mentioned, we're tabling the actual landscape portion itself because they don't know if they want to put rock in there, they want to put shrubs, trees, if they want to irrigate it or not. So that'll come up down the road when they decide what they want to do with that. The real emphasis really is looking at these other components where they're able to go ahead and hopefully start construction on those areas.
All right. All right, any other questions? Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Can we approve phase 1 as is and then conditional on phase 2, or do we have to approve all of it?
There are 2 phases here. You do have the option of approving both of those, recognizing that landscape is actually optional in the C4 district downtown. But in this case, it's not unusual for the applicant to finalize landscaping near to the time of planning and bring that back to city staff to look at before it's planted. So you would not be looking at probably the landscaping itself, mainly just the overall design and character of the physical improvements.
Yeah, if there's something about the design concept that's been presented that you either think should be modified or some specific element that you want brought back to you, that would be within your discretion to ask it to be brought back to you. But as John mentioned, we had like some of the plans for Assurance Partners and things like that where they showed the board their concept of where they were going to place landscape islands and things like that, but the board just left it to staff to work with the owners on the final, whether it was ornamental grasses or shrubs. It's certainly within your discretion if you want to see detailed plans for phase 2, but the what's being brought forward for you today is the concept of taking out the inset parking and replacing it with curb and having a widened sidewalk and enhanced streetscape there. So
Okay.
that would be your option. The way that we structured it is that you would be telling the applicant that you approve of their phase 2 concept and then leaving it to staff to work out the final planting plan.
Thank you. I move that we approve it with any recommendations back to the staff to make any additional changes on landscaping.
Okay, do I hear a second? Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve option number 2 as set forth by the city, with the landscaping being approved by city staff and not the design review board. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, John, new business 3.2.
Madam Chair, I'm going to cover at least some of the initial
Okay.
parts of this and give you background information about the concept of sidewalk dining, and in this case plaza dining in the C4 Central Business District. This particular application was filed by JKSK Corporation on behalf of the Barolo Grill Restaurant, and they're requesting your approval of a sidewalk cafe license agreement that would allow a fenced-in outdoor dining area to be established in the Strand Public Plaza that's located behind the restaurant building. And the restaurant itself is addressed as 112 South Santa Fe. So what you have in your packet is you have, first of all, the application that was submitted, and then behind that we have, just for the board's benefit, given you a background report on the genesis of the sidewalk dining ordinance and regulations. And that really started with an initiative of the City Commission in 2014 to discuss what kind of changes the local codes would be needed to allow permanent sidewalk dining areas accessory to restaurants in the downtown area.
She can't hear you, so she just...
Okay, we'll try that. All right, so we're summarizing the background report here that is in your packet, and again, this concept dates back to spring of 2014, and the City Commission asked staff to proceed with drafting potential amendments to city code to accommodate this type of use, and staff met with this body in May of 2014 and got feedback on the concept. And one of the things that was also looked at was, at the time, we didn't clearly allow pots, planters, and bicycle racks on sidewalks in the C4 district, so that was addressed as well, and it all came together on June 23rd, 2014, when a new city code was adopted. Sidewalk dining guidelines were adopted with more specific guidance. Then last year, we had 2 applications actually filed, and we identified some things in the ordinance that we felt needed to be fixed as we were going through those applications. And so one of the things was just to make clear that in the case where you had a restaurant operator and a building owner, that they were jointly responsible for seeing that things were followed through. The other thing, and we may still look at that further, but we had a situation where the way the ordinance was written, that if a application came to the board in April, it would potentially expire on May 1st, which didn't give the applicant much of a chance to get started. So that initial term was modified to extend the initial approval period. But the emphasis is that this is designed to be something that is renewable, and it's also revocable. So if we had a sidewalk dining area that was not operating in accordance with the terms and limitations that were set up, options would be to either not renew that or even to have the board recommend that it be, their approval be revoked. So we gave you a background report, and then we just gave you a handout that summarized the application requirements, and then our sidewalk dining area guidelines that are in your packet. That's more or less a handout that we put together for applicants to help them follow to get their applications submitted and processed. So in this particular case, we have now a signed sidewalk cafe license application. We have the application fee for the initial use, a certificate of insurance, naming the city as an additional insured because this is on city property, and then a site plan indicating the location of the sidewalk dining area. For existing businesses, we asked for a copy of the food establishment license and a copy of their sales and liquor tax reports for the previous 12 months. I think one thing that is not maybe clearly understood is that sidewalk dining, the word dining or cafe, is intentional. If you were a tavern or bar that had no kitchen and no food service, you cannot have an outdoor sidewalk dining area because the dining area has to include the ability to order and receive food. So it's not a sidewalk beer garden, it's not a sidewalk drinking area, it's a sidewalk dining area where alcoholic liquor may be sold and consumed. So this particular application, we provided notice to surrounding property owners for initial hearing date in May. This was postponed by you twice, and we arrived at June 13th as the best meeting date to pull everything together for your benefit. And your role today is to conduct a public hearing on this application and to make your best recommendation to the City Commission that you have found the proposed sidewalk dining area would conform or not conform with our sidewalk cafe license requirements. So what the ordinance envisions is kind of a step-by-step process of looking at these different elements that we've started with page 2 on your report. The first one is the site plan layout. First thing you will notice is that the site layout, if you could go to a layout, Dustin.
Be the next slide.
That's a floor plan. Okay, here's our site layout. Two things we would call to your attention. One is there's 608 square feet contained within the enclosed dining area. And there are also within that area 3 existing landscape planters that were part of the Strand Plaza development. It's staff's understanding that those planters will remain, but we would want to get some clarification from the applicant whether that is the case or not. But the plan as laid out has 10 tables with a seating capacity of 30 persons, and it does exceed the 200-foot maximum that's in the ordinance. But the ordinance also says is sufficient information is presented by the applicant to demonstrate that an increase in allowable size for outdoor dining area is needed for optimum function. then you can recommend that that 200 square foot limit be exceeded. One thing we did want to point out as you look at this layout is that along Santa Fe, the typical sidewalk sections in the new streetscape are going to be 16 to 17 feet wide. This particular plaza is 50 feet wide from the back of the building to the alley. So there's quite a bit more room for this type of outdoor dining in the plaza compared to a sidewalk. One thing that we don't want any physical obstruction, such as outside planters, light poles, things like that, within 15 feet of the dining area, and we need to maintain at least a 6-foot path of travel. That was designed to make sure that sidewalk dining still leaves a 6-foot path of travel on the public sidewalk. This, again, the plaza is 50 feet wide. This would occupy the east 32 feet of the plaza, leaving 18 feet between the edge of the fence and the alley. You'll also want to note that this is kind of an L-shaped restaurant, so the frontage of this dining area, the only opposing building fronts are part of the Barolo Grill, so it doesn't extend in front of any other business or building. The plan is to use a 4-foot tall ornamental steel fence. It'll be a 2-rail system with a flush top rail, and matching gates will be provided. One of the things to consider is the ability to remove and disassemble the barrier. The initial submittal we got showed a shop drawing with an anchoring system showing a 21-inch deep footing for the fence. And so we are concerned that a footing of that type could cause permanent damage to the brick surface of the plaza. Sidewalk barriers are supposed to be designed to be removable. So we would want to point out that the sidewalk dining areas at both Old Chicago and Blue Sky have been approved with their fence posts being surface mounted with removable anchor bolts. So do you have an example of that here, John? So you want to use this and kind of show how that's going to work for the other two?
The fence itself is the Ameristar montage project, and they do allow for recesses and depressions. The previous slide showed a 21-foot deep footing, but that was assuming that there was soil or something not as firm as the surface underneath that to require that deep a footing. That was probably for a soil application. On rigid applications, they do carry a part that is a 4-point flange. There's a steel flange, and it does have a receptacle for square fences, and it would have 4 openings for anchor bolts. This would get away from having a deep footing or a very large depression should the fence be moved or removed at some point. So we do want to see that these projects don't harm the brick and masonry where they're located, and that would be a way of doing that is to choose a surface mount application like that's shown on the Ameristar product.
And then I do believe, Dustin, we have the PDF of the table spec, the light string and the aluminum chairs. So as far as one of the things that the ordinance requires is that the type of furniture used be durable and designed for outdoor use to stand up to the elements. So this is the proposed type of table that would be placed in the plaza area. It has a synthetic teak top. There's both 2-chair and 4-chair tables that will be used, and then they will have a stackable aluminum side chair used for all seating. And so that is an indoor-outdoor rated chair. At this time, there's no plan for any umbrellas or benches or anything out in that area. So as an ongoing concern, barriers, furniture, other objects must be maintained in a state of good repair so they are structurally sound and aren't subject to weather-related deterioration. I think we have a plan for string lighting that Dustin has here. That is the plan to have exterior grade light string fixture suspended over the area. No other lighting or electrical fixtures are indicated on the plan. There's no stage or anything that's set aside for outdoor amplified sounds or bands. They can pipe in background music to the dining area as long as that's not audible more than 50 feet away from the area. There cannot be any exposed. There won't be any exposed or internal heating fixtures proposed. There are aluminum frame awnings that are proposed on the south and west facades of the building facing the dining area. These are above an existing storefront entrance, and so those could be incorporated into the license agreement that would be developed for Barolo Grill. So we have showed you the catalog cut sheets, the fence and barrier, the dining area lighting, tables, and chairs. So the review process that was set up is that applications are filed with the Planning Division. They're referred to the zoning administrator, to the Design Review Board for review and comment. Based on your recommendations, an actual license agreement, which is a legal document, will be prepared between the restaurant operator and the city, and that will be prepared for consideration and signing by the City Commission. If it's approved, the agreement authorizes the placement of what are private improvements on public property. Again, this can be renewed in subsequent years. You would, at this time, renew the application. One of the things that we want to discuss with you that some communities are doing is that they're having a staff level renewal and only bringing it back to the board for difficult cases. But that is something that we will discuss with you later, because we haven't got to the point of actually renewing any of these. We have to get one up and operating first. We can report to you that this board has approved one for Old Chicago and Blue Sky, and we have issued notices to proceed for both of those to begin construction. So we're at step 1, which is reviewed by the Design Review Board. Step 2 is your recommendation to the City Commission, and there's criteria that you're supposed to use to look at this, and that is, will this comply with all applicable provisions of our code and regulations? Do you think this plan will contribute to the welfare of the public? Do you think it will cause injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood? Do you think the location and size with respect to unobstructed walkway will not unreasonably impede pedestrian traffic? And so one of the things we did was walk through this. We have a to-scale site plan. We have a certificate of liability insurance. We've received additional details about the furnishings and fixtures. Just for the benefit of the board, is that we believe that a certain level of detail is needed for the board to make the required findings and take action on the application. One of the things is that there is no building permit that's issued for sidewalk dining areas, so you are almost at the level of doing the permit review at this meeting, and so we want to make sure we have sufficient detail for you to know what you're being asked to approve. And so we asked for and have supplemented our report by providing some information about the need for the greater than 200 square foot dining area. The plan is to have a full service patio in the rear rather than a front sidewalk. The plaza is approximately 45 feet deep by 100 feet long, and they point out that this would still cover only 14% of the public space. And we have had our discussions about using perhaps an alternative anchoring system to footings. So your options, after getting any questions you have answered, would be to make a recommendation to the City Commission to approve this license agreement application, make a recommendation to approve it subject to any conditions that are approved by you, a majority of your membership, postpone consideration if you think we haven't provided or the applicant hasn't provided sufficient information, or you could deny the application upon making findings stating the reasons for your denial. And so our recommendation would be to incorporate the 10 conditions that we have on pages 8 and 9, which are essentially a summation of guidelines that are already in place, but those are there to reinforce those guidelines. And what we have provided for you is you're supposed to indicate to the Commission the findings that you made in order to support your recommendation. So what we have provided for you on attachment A is possible findings for you to tie back to that relate to the size, the location, and how you think this relates to the vibrancy and activity level of downtown, and how it would or would not obstruct pedestrian access in the downtown area. So given the size of this area and the fact that all of its frontage is abutting the restaurant building, we don't see how this would have any impact or negative impact on adjoining owners. And I don't know, John, on our initial notice, we didn't receive any feedback from any neighboring properties, did we?
We've received no feedback at this point.
So we sent notice out to neighboring property owners of this proposal, and we have not received any feedback. So with that, it's quite a mouthful, but we want to be as detailed as possible, and that doesn't mean you can't ask questions, but we tried to provide as much information as possible to fill in any information gaps. So with that, staff is at your disposal for any questions you have, or if you'd prefer to address those to the applicant's representative, they are here as well.
Thank you, Dean, John, and Dustin. Board, do you have any questions for staff or the applicant?
Probably the only question that staff has for the applicant's representative is we've kind of got, and we don't know if they're mixed messages or not, but we've kind of been told that the planters, Dustin, if you could go back to the photo, that all the planters would remain as they are, and then we've also been told that that the designer's planning on removal of one or more of the planters inside the dining area. So if the applicant could clarify that for us so we don't misrepresent what's happening there, that would be helpful.
I have a question, Dean. How does, I'm assuming what we're looking at now is what is existing today. Has Strand Plaza been redone yet? Is it supposed to be redone as part of the downtown project?
What will be redone is the area leading between the buildings and accessing Santa Fe. We're aware that that area is being renovated for the new streetscape, but that would be limited to that 25-foot corridor there.
Okay, so nothing is,
To the best of our knowledge, nothing is on the streetscape plan addresses this area. It does address this.
okay.
And so the reason for this being referred to as Strand Plaza is the Strand movie theater used to occupy this space right here, and then we had these buildings both removed, and it resulted in our only L-shaped plaza downtown. But the streetscape emphasis is this portion here, and we're down here. So to the best of our knowledge, there's no plans to do anything at that north end.
Okay, thank you.
My only concern is that 21-inch footing as opposed to the surface mounted. And I don't see that listed here in the recommendations for the conditional approval.
I thought that we
It's
had,
not listed, yeah.
And also, you kept saying it's going into brick. Isn't that concrete back there? There's no actual brick back there, right?
Where this exists, there'll be concrete surface. There is some inset brick back there, but it won't be reaching them. Under our staff recommendation, ask if the applicant addresses the questions relating to the proposed size and the fence anchoring system to the satisfaction of the board, then we would recommend option number 2. So you do have that ability to make that a condition or request more information from the applicant.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other questions for staff or the applicant?
yeah, I think,
Questions for the applicant, but
yeah, I think, you know, we didn't do a very good job of putting that into the recommendation or conditions, but what we were trying to point out is that one of the findings that the board is supposed to make is that the proposed anchoring system will not result in damage to the sidewalk or plaza. And so we think that the proposal to use 21-inch deep footing either needs to be explained further or that the board should approve the alternate use of the flange system that we've described.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Do you have questions for the applicant?
yeah, just invite him up here.
Could you please come to the podium? Thank you. Just introduce yourself. Okay, thank
Jeff
you.
Mace with Compo Realty on behalf of the applicant. I was waiting for you all to be finished with staff before coming up. I'm not sure where you're hearing, have you talked with the designer about the planter removal? That's news to me and has not been part of any of the conversations we've had with the applicant. And in fact, the conversation we've had has been in the face of that they were just gonna utilize, they were gonna re-landscape, but they were gonna utilize the existing planters. I don't know where you heard, staff, can you speak to where we're hearing that? Just so I can run it down.
You want to share that, John, where you heard it and shared with me?
On that, I think it was not something that I heard, but
Well, then if that's a misstatement, then that's my fault, Jeff, because John came to me this morning and told me that he'd been visiting with the contractor, and the contractor had told him that planters
Okay.
were going to be removed. And
That's,
if that is a misstatement on my part, I apologize, but it came from Mr. Berger, who told me that a contractor had told him that.
I don't have any issue with that, but I want to make sure that isn't the case because it hasn't been what's been part of our conversation with the restaurant owners.
We just
So I
wanted to
wanna
make sure
it
that
wasn't-
we didn't mischaracterize anything. So.
Right. And I'll run it down with the contractor and make sure we're all on the same page to that end. I mean, I wasn't looking to point a finger, I just had not heard that, so I didn't know how to address it from a removal perspective. We have talked about, that they were to remain and then they were going to go in and re-landscape them and dress them up because they would be inside the dining area was the conversation that we've had the multiple times we've been on site looking at the patio and how we were going to do that with the designers. So I will run that down and circle back with staff if what they're hearing is something that I'm unaware of. As far as patio size, man, if you look at the comp plan for downtown that OH&H did, I mean, it was actually called out in one of the meetings to be a beer garden. And so, I mean, it makes sense by virtue of size to have patio dining. And I get that when the ordinance was written, it was written, for front sidewalk area. But as a result, we had to address the need and, which we felt like we did in writing to staff. So if there's any questions or concerns relative to size, I'd be happy to discuss those with you. But as we indicated, we're taking a very small portion of a large patio area. And as staff did a good job of representing, we're contingent as property owners all the way around the patio. We're not abutting another property owner. So, as far as we have already talked, I mean, when we sent the cut sheets, it was a lawn cut sheet, as staff indicated, with the 21-inch footing, followed up with the contractor that'll be installing the fence. They've got the surface-mounted anchor bolts. Sent me an email, yeah, we'd surface-mount it anyway. It makes no sense for us to go deep through the concrete at any rate, but happy to have that listed as an 11th condition, if that makes your action more palatable for the board. And as I indicated, we don't have any issues with any of the outlined 10 conditions as outlined by staff. So other than that, I would stand for any questions you may have.
I think this is great. I can't recall a time since living here that portion of Strand Plaza was used for anything. So it's nice to see it'll get some use and bring some life into it. I agree with you that you're taking a very small portion of the patio, which is nice that you haven't taken all that you can there in that corner. My one question is more of a design question. When I look at the fence, it says it's 4 feet tall, and you have typical dining table height tables at 30 inches. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, have you kind of thought through how that will sit when people are sitting in there? It'll come right above head height.
It's what the designer provided us, and I mean, you're saying 6 foot versus 4 foot? Is that what you're getting
No, I'm
at?
saying like 3 foot, because right now, if you're sitting and eating at a table that short, and you're looking out in the plaza, you're looking through the bars. And so I'm
What is the
thinking,
minimum
if it
in
were
the
me,
code
I'd
or the
lower it to
guideline?
3 feet, so you're looking out over it.
I'm not certain, and maybe staff can help me here, but I'm not certain because of alcoholic beverages that we may not have to be at a certain height out there.
I thought it
Is
was
that-
3 feet.
And maybe, and you would know as well. I don't know what code requires, but this was the cut sheet that they provided, and I guess one other very pertinent point here is I appreciate your flexibility as we ran into you taking action, letting us kick this can down the road, if you will. We do appreciate that as we ran into our conflicts of being here in front of you. It's something we can look back on. I mean, if the material is appropriate in your mind, and you feel, I mean, it'd be 30 inches or 6 foot tall one way or the other. I'm not sure what's going to be required from alcohol. Are you saying it's?
The code or the guideline requirement is flexible. It says all barriers must be between 36 inches and 48 inches in height. So there's discretion between, you can be as high as 48, it can be as low as 36. And I think
the
you're
one-
saying for Blue Sky was 36.
Was it 36? I can't remember if it was 36 or 42, but either way, we had.
It was not 48, I'm pretty sure of
Was it?
that.
Okay.
We can revisit that with the
I
designer
mean, I'm just
and the
thinking someone
owners.
who is, wanting to dine there, I don't think I'd be wanting to sit at a table and be looking out on the plaza through the rails, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, just think about that a little bit.
I can revisit with them and see. I appreciate the input.
And we'll go
relative
back
to
for
approval.
your benefit and for Jeff's benefit to make sure what the height was for Old Chicago and for Blue Sky, but I don't recall either of them being the full 48 inches. But they could
Right.
very well have been 42 or 40, something
and-
in
I can
there.
see that on
Blue Sky
Front
has,
Street, though.
He's looking at putting high top tables in there, which makes it a little bit of a different situation. But if you've got these regular 30-inch tables, then people are sitting down pretty low.
Yeah, it's not really so much so as not being able to pass things over the fence. It's more just to the legal argument that the state came up with is that as a general rule, you can't consume alcohol on public right-of-way or sidewalks. What the license agreement does is it's basically turning public space over to private, which
space.
then allows the consumption, but they want to have a physical barrier so that defines where alcohol can be consumed and that it can't be consumed outside the barrier.
In other
So-
communities, we've seen 6 feet required by communities for this. That's I wasn't sure, and I assumed at that time, false on my part, that that was a state requirement.
I think the 36 to 48, we worked with Kansas ABC on this, so I'm pretty sure we're within their
Okay.
guidance.
Well, we'll talk about that. I mean, I don't know that it's. I mean, if you're satisfied with the anchoring system and the material, I mean, relative to approval for today.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you for your time.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your flexibility as well. Thank you.
All right, staff and board, any other discussion?
Yeah, I think the only thing that we said to adequately address that, because we wanted to kind of flesh out the anchoring system at the meeting, that if you did think it appropriate, that you could add an 11th condition that just requires the surface-mounted anchoring bolts for the barrier fence as a 11th condition, and then that will get it into the record that that's been incorporated. But other than that, the 10 conditions that we have there are basically a summation of already existing guidelines that we have.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion from the board?
I move that we follow option 2 provided by the staff to make the recommendation to the city commission based on required findings to approve the sidewalk cafe license agreement application subject to the 10 conditions listed in our packet today, along with a condition number 11 that the design of the fence needs to have the ability to be disassembled and removed without any damage to the sidewalk or site.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve option 2 with the 10 conditions plus the addition of the 11th condition with the anchor bolts rather than the 21-inch footing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
So for the benefit of the applicant, and the board, what happens next is the action here gets put into the form of a written license agreement between the City of Salina and JKSK Corporation. That draft agreement will be forwarded to the applicant for review and comment, and then if it's all good on both parties' sides, then that will go before the City Commission for signature, and that becomes the formal authorization to construct the improvements. Is there a time frame how this is going to tie into the actual renovations of the building?
If I'd been here in May, I've been wrong, so that's my understanding that they're mobilizing right now. Dumpsters are working out where we put dumpsters there.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Yeah, we did. We actually had a meeting with a contractor about where they could put a demolition dumpster for, and it's a little bit of a challenge because part of that's privately owned back there, so. But I think we have it worked out.
So to answer your question, it's my understanding that the renovation and the improvements are set to start.
Okay. So first thing we'll do is we'll do up a letter summarizing today's action, and then there will be an agreement drafted, reviewed by legal counsel, and then sent to you all to review and comment on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. John, I see, do we have any unfinished business or other business?
The staff has brought no other unfinished business. It doesn't appear that we'll have any applications for our June 27th meeting. We will be revisiting the facade down at 123 South Santa Fe that Bob Mueller and Restore Properties has done the demolition on. They've been working with the designer on the restorative portion of that, as well as some of the openings with our engineering department. So we're hoping to bring that forward to you at that meeting.
And for their benefit, that is the north face of Campbell Plaza?
Yes.
All right. And seeing no other public, do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Can approve the motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll second it.
Okay, moving and second to adjourn. Thank you all for coming.